Tonight's story is about a moment that shocked everyone watching live, a moment that nobody saw coming, and a moment that reminds us why you should never underestimate the power of authenticity in Hollywood. Before we get into this wild situation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me whose side you're on after you hear this whole story. Trust me, you're going to want to weigh in on this one. So, picture this. The studio lights are hot. The audience is buzzing with excitement, and Eddie Murphy is walking onto the Jimmy Kimmel Live set. This is supposed to be a celebration. Eddie is there to promote his latest project, something he's genuinely proud of, and the crowd is already on their feet before he even sits down. The applause is thunderous. This is Eddie Murphy we're talking about, a living legend who's given us decades of unforgettable performances, a man who helped define comedy for multiple generations. Jimmy starts off the interview the way he always does, with that signature grin and casual energy. Eddie Murphy, everybody. Man, it is so good to have you here. How are you feeling? The audience claps again, and Eddie settles into the chair with that cool confidence he's known for. I'm good, Jimmy. I'm good. Happy to be here. Happy to be working. You know how it is. His voice is smooth, relaxed. The voice of someone who's done 1,000 interviews and knows exactly how to handle them. So, let's talk about this new project, Jimmy says, leaning forward with his cards in hand. You're back doing what you do best, making people laugh. What made you want to jump back into this? Eddie's eyes light up a little, and you can tell he's excited to talk about his work. Well, I took some time to just be with my family, enjoy life, but the itch never really goes away. When this script came across my desk, I knew it was something special. It's got heart, it's got humor, and it's got something to say. That's what I look for. Now, the audience appreciates that answer. There's some nodding, some more applause. Jimmy nods, too, but then he pivots in a way that feels just slightly off. Eddie, I gotta ask, and people have been curious about this for years. When you took that break from Hollywood, there were rumors. People said you were difficult to work with, that you were too demanding. Was that part of why you stepped away? The question hangs in the air for a second, and you can see Eddie's expression shift. Not dramatically, but enough. His smile stays, but it's different now. Tighter, difficult, Eddie repeats. And there's a weight to how he says it. Jimmy, I don't know where you heard that, but I've always been professional. I've always shown up, done the work, treated people with respect. If wanting things done right makes someone difficult, then I guess every person who takes their craft seriously is difficult. There's no hostility in his voice yet, but there's definitely a line being drawn. Jimmy chuckles, trying to lighten the mood. No, I'm not saying you were difficult. I'm just saying that's what people said. You know how Hollywood gossip is. Eddie leans back in his chair, his arms crossing loosely. I do know how Hollywood gossip is, Jimmy. That's why I don't pay it much attention. But I'll tell you what I do pay attention to, and that's the work. That's what matters, not what some anonymous source tells a tabloid. The audience senses the temperature change. Some people are still smiling, but others are quiet now, watching carefully. Jimmy glances at his cards, then back at Eddie. Sure, I get that. But you have to admit you've been selective. I mean, you turned down a lot of projects, right? Selective. Yes, Eddie says, his tone measured. That's called having standards. Jimmy, when you've been in this business as long as I have, you learn what's worth your time and what isn't. You learn that saying no is just as important as saying yes. Jimmy nods like he agrees, but then he goes somewhere unexpected, right? But some people might say that's a privilege not everyone has. Like newer comedians, they can't afford to be that selective. They have to take what they can get. Eddie's jaw tightens just slightly. Are you comparing me to newer comedians right now? Jimmy raises his hands defensively. No, I'm just saying it must be nice to be in a position where you can pick and choose. Eddie uncrosses his arms and leans forward. Jimmy, let me tell you something. I earned that position. Every single person who has the luxury of being selective earned it. You don't start at the top. I spent years grinding, doing clubs, doing whatever I could to get noticed. Nobody handed me anything. So, yeah, it is nice, but it's nice because I worked for it. The audience claps at that loud and genuine. Eddie's not playing around anymore, and people respect it. Jimmy tries to move on. Of course. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. Let's talk about comedy itself. You said before that comedy today is too soft, that people can't take a joke anymore. Do you still feel that way? Eddie takes a breath, and you can tell he's choosing his words carefully. What I said was that comedy should be able to push boundaries. That's what makes it powerful. But there's a difference between pushing boundaries and just being mean. I've never been about being mean. I've been about making people laugh, making them think, sometimes making them uncomfortable in a way that opens up a conversation. But where's the line, Jimmy presses? Because some of your old material, if you did it today, people would cancel you for it. Eddie's eyes narrowed just a fraction. Cancel me, Jimmy. Nobody's canceling me. And you know why? Because I respect people. I've grown. I've learned. And I've never punched down. Comedy evolves. I've evolved. But I'm not going to apologize for making people laugh. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. Jimmy shifts in his seat, sensing he's not winning this exchange. I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm just saying the landscape has changed. Eddie nods slowly. The landscape has changed. You're right about that. But you know what hasn't changed? Talent, authenticity, respect. Those things are timeless, Jimmy. And if you have those, you don't need to worry about being canceled or whatever term people are using these days. The audience is fully on Eddie's side now. You can hear it in their reactions. Every time he speaks, there's energy agreement. Jimmy's trying to regain control of the interview, but it's slipping. So, what's next for you after this project? Are you thinking about doing stand-up again? People would love to see you back on stage. Eddie looks at him for a long moment. Maybe if the right opportunity comes along, but I'm not in a rush. I'm at a place in my life where I only do things that mean something to me. That must be nice, Jimmy says again. And this time it lands differently. There's an edge to it, almost like a subtle jab. Eddie catches it immediately. You keep saying that, Jimmy. That must be nice. What are you trying to say? Jimmy laughs it off. Nothing, man. I'm just saying you're in a good position. Eddie doesn't laugh. No, say what you mean. If you got something to say, say it. The studio goes quiet. This is live television, and things just got real. Jimmy shifts in his seat, clearly not expecting Eddie to call him out so directly. The camera operators are still rolling. The audience is dead silent, and you can feel the tension radiating through the screen. Jimmy tries to laugh it off one more time. Eddie, come on. I'm not trying to start anything here. I'm just having conversation. Eddie's expression doesn't change. A conversation goes both ways, Jimmy. But ever since I sat down, it feels like you've been trying to make some kind of point. So let's hear it. What's the point? Jimmy looks down at his cards, then back up at Eddie. Look, all I'm saying is that you've had a long career. You've had your ups and downs, and now you're back. Some people are excited about that, and some people are skeptical. That's just the reality. Eddie tilts his head slightly. Skeptical about what? About whether I can still be funny. About whether I'm still relevant. Jimmy, I've been relevant longer than most of these people have been alive. I don't need to prove anything to anyone, but don't you think there's value in staying connected to your audience? Jimmy asks, and there's something almost condescending in his tone now, like the world has changed so much. Social media, streaming, all of that. Some of the old guard have struggled to adapt. Eddie lets out a short laugh, but there's no humor in it. The old guard, is that what you're calling me now? Jimmy, I was doing streaming specials before streaming was even a thing. I've adapted to every single shift in this industry. Question isn't whether I can adapt. The question is whether the industry can keep up with me. The audience erupts at that. Whistles and applause filling the studio. Eddie's not backing down, and people love it. Jimmy's face flushes slightly, and you can see him trying to regain his footing. Okay, I hear you. But let's be honest, there's been criticism. Some people have said your recent work doesn't have the same spark as your earlier stuff. How do you respond to that? Eddie leans forward, his elbows on his knees. I respond by saying that those people are entitled to their opinion. But I also know that you can't please everyone. Some people want me to stay frozen in time. doing the same exact thing I did 30 years ago. But I'm not that person anymore. I've grown. My comedy has grown. And if that doesn't work for some people, that's fine. There are plenty of people who appreciate what I'm doing now. Jimmy nods slowly. So, you're saying the critics are wrong? Eddie shakes his head. I'm saying the critics are just voices. Jimmy, everybody's got one. But at the end of the day, I trust my instincts. I trust my talent. And I trust that the people who really know comedy, the people who really understand what I'm doing, they see it. The rest is just noise. Jimmy takes a sip of water from his mug. Buy himself a moment. You know, Eddie, I've interviewed a lot of people on this show. Some of them handle tough questions well, and some of them get defensive. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation here. Eddie's eyes flash. Defensive? You think I'm being defensive? Jimmy, I'm being honest. There's a difference. You've been taking shots at me since I sat down, and I've been polite. I've answered your questions. But now you're trying to frame it like I'm the problem here. That's not how this works. The audience is locked in now. This is a kind of unscripted moment that people will be talking about for days, maybe weeks. Jimmy spreads his hands. I'm not taking shots at you, man. If that's how it's coming across, I apologize. That wasn't my intention. Then what was your intention? Eddie asks, his voice calm but firm. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you invited me here to embarrass me, to make me look out of touch or washed up or whatever narrative you're trying to push. And I'm telling you right now, that's not going to happen. Jimmy's mouth opens and closes. He glances off camera for a second, maybe at a producer, then back at Eddie. Eddie, that's not what this is. I have nothing but respect for you. Respect, Eddie repeats. And now there's real fire in his voice. Jimmy, respect isn't just a word you say. It's how you treat people and the way you've been talking to me tonight. That's not respect. That's condescension. That's trying to elevate yourself by putting me down. And I've been in this game long enough to recognize it. The audience gasps audibly. Some people are uncomfortable. Others are cheering. This is reality television at its rawest. And it's happening live. Jimmy tries to recover. Look, I think we're having a miscommunication here. Let's just take a breath, and we can move on to something else. Let's talk about your family or your hobbies. Something lighter. Eddie stands up, not quickly, not dramatically, but deliberately. He removes a microphone clip to his shirt and places it carefully on the chair. No, Jimmy, I don't think we're going to do that. The studio gasps again, louder this time. Jimmy's eyes go wide. Eddie, come on. Don't. Let's just finish the interview. Eddie looks at him, really looks at him, and shakes his head. I came here tonight to talk about my work, to connect with people who appreciate what I do. I didn't come here to be disrespected. I didn't come here to be your punching bag, so you can get some viral moment for your show. I got too much respect for myself to sit here and take that. Jimmy stands up to his hands, raised in a pleading gesture. Eddie, please just sit down. We can talk about whatever you want. I'm sorry if I offended you. That really wasn't my goal. Eddie's already walking toward the edge of the stage. Your goal doesn't matter, Jimmy. What matters is what actually happened. And what happened is you invited me here under the pretense of a friendly interview, and then you spent the whole time trying to tear me down. I'm not doing this. The audience doesn't know how to react. Some people are clapping for Eddie, supporting his decision. Others are sitting in stunned silence. Jimmy's face is red now, panic setting in. Eddie, we're live. You can't just walk off. Eddie stops at the edge of the stage and turns back. Watch me. And with that, he walks off camera, his footsteps echoing in the now silent studio. Jimmy stands there frozen. The band doesn't play. The audience doesn't make a sound. For a moment, it's like time has stopped. Then Jimmy turns to the camera, trying to salvage something. Anything. Well, that was unexpected. We're going to take a quick break. But before they can cut to commercial, you can hear Eddie's voice from offstage. Not yelling, but loud enough to be picked up by the microphones. You don't get to do that to me. Not now. Not ever. Jimmy looks at the producers, at the crew, at the audience. Everyone is looking back at him with the same expression. Shock, disbelief, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of disappointment in him. The cameras keep rolling for a few more seconds, capturing Jimmy's face as it goes through a series of emotions. Confusion, anger, embarrassment. Then finally, the screen cuts to black and a commercial starts playing. But the damage is done. In those few minutes, something fundamental shifted. The audience watching at home, the people in the studio, everyone just witnessed a moment of pure, unfiltered truth. They saw a legend refuse to be diminished. They saw a host lose control of his own show. And they saw what happens when someone who's been in the industry for decades decides they've had enough. Social media is going to explode. The clips are going to spread everywhere. And the question everyone is going to be asking is the same question hanging in the air of that studio right now. What just happened? More importantly, whose side are you on? Because this isn't just about an interview gone wrong. This is about respect, about how we treat people who've paved the way, about whether honesty matters more than playing it safe. When the show comes back from commercial, Jimmy is sitting at his desk alone. The chair where Eddie was supposed to be is empty, a visual reminder of what just transpired. Jimmy's composure is shaky at best, and you can tell he's been getting directions from producers during the break. He looks directly into the camera and takes a deep breath. So, obviously that didn't go as planned. Eddie Murphy has left the building, and I want to address what just happened here. The audience is still quiet, uncertain. Jimmy continues, "Look, I was trying to have an honest conversation, asking the kinds of questions that I think people want answered, but clearly Eddie felt differently about the tone of those questions. And if I came across as disrespectful, that genuinely was not my intention. There's something hollow about the apology, something that feels more like damage control than actual remorse." You can hear a few scattered claps from the audience, but most people are just watching, waiting. We've had Eddie scheduled for weeks. Jimmy goes on, "I was excited to talk to him, to hear about his new project, to celebrate his return to the spotlight. I didn't think asking about his career choices or the changing landscape of comedy was out of bounds. These are things people talk about. He's defending himself now, and it's not landing well." Someone in the audience shouts out, "You were rude," and a murmur of agreement ripples through the crowd. Jimmy hears it. He has too. His jaw clenches. I was doing my job. Part of my job is asking questions that might be uncomfortable sometimes. That's what separates a real interview from just promotional fluff. But I understand that not everyone sees it that way. The more he talks, the worse it gets. He's digging himself deeper, and you can see it on the faces in the audience. They're not buying it. One woman stands up, and before security can even react, she says loudly, "He's Eddie Murphy. He deserves respect." Other people start nodding, some standing too. Jimmy holds up his hands. "I respect Eddie Murphy. I've always respected Eddie Murphy. But respect doesn't mean I can't ask challenging questions." A man in the front row shouts back. There's challenging and there's attacking. You were attacking him. The energy in the room is turning against Jimmy completely now. This is his show, his studio, but he's losing his own audience. Jimmy looks flustered. Okay, I hear you, but let's be fair here. Eddie walked off in the middle of a live show. That's unprofessional. No matter how you feel about the questions, the moment those words leave his mouth, you can feel the shift. That was the wrong thing to say. Someone yells, "No, you're unprofessional." And suddenly there's a chorus of voices. The audience is actively turning on their host. Jimmy tries to talk over them. Guys, please. We can disagree, but let's keep this respectful." The irony of him asking for respect after what just happened is not lost on anyone. A woman near the back stands and starts walking toward the exit. Then another person follows. Then another. Jimmy watches in disbelief as members of his own studio audience begin leaving. Not all of them, but enough to make a statement. Enough to make it clear that they're not interested in watching him try to spin this. "Hey, where are you going?" The show is not over. We got more guests coming, but the people walking out don't stop. They don't look back. One man pauses at the door and turns. "You lost us when you lost Eddie." Then he's gone. The camera cuts to a wide shot, and you can see the empty seats forming in the audience. Jimmy looks at his producers off camera, his expression desperate. Someone makes a cutting motion with their hand. The universal signal to wrap it up. Jimmy turns back to the remaining audience, and his voice is quieter now, defeated. All right, we're going to take another break. When we come back, we'll have our next guest. But the energy is gone. The magic that makes live television work. That connection between host and audience, it's been severed. During the next commercial break, more people leave. By the time the show comes back, the studio is noticeably less full than it was at the start. Jimmy introduces his next guest, a young actor promoting some streaming series, but nobody cares. The interview is flat, lifeless. The actor can feel it, too, giving short answers and looking uncomfortable. Jimmy tries to inject energy into his questions. So, your character goes through this amazing transformation in Season 2. How did you prepare for that? The actor responds, yeah, I work with an acting coach and did some research. But his eyes keep darting to the depleted audience, to the awkward atmosphere. This is supposed to be fun, exciting, a platform to promote his work, but instead it feels like a funeral. They get through the segment barely. Jimmy thanks the actor, who practically runs off stage. Then Jimmy turns to the camera for his closing remarks. Well, that's our show for tonight. It was certainly memorable. I want to thank everyone who stuck around. There's a weak smattering of applause. We'll be back tomorrow night with more great guests and hopefully a little less drama. He tries to smile, but it doesn't reach his eyes. Good night, everyone. The show's theme music plays, but it feels wrong, out of place. The credits roll over footage of Jimmy sitting at his desk alone. As the remaining audience files out without much enthusiasm when the cameras finally stop rolling, Jimmy slumps back in his chair. The crew is moving around packing up equipment, but nobody approaches him. Nobody offers reassurance or pats him on the back. They just do their jobs in silence. One of the producers finally walks over. You can't hear what they're saying, but you can read their body language. The producer is gesturing, clearly stressed. Jimmy is shaking his head, running his hands through his hair. Whatever conversation they're having, it's not going well. The producer eventually walks away, leaving Jimmy sitting there under the bright studio lights that are starting to dim. This is what humiliation looks like. Not a single dramatic moment, but a slow accumulation of failures. The questions that cross a line. The guest who refused to be disrespected. The audience that walked out. The show that limped to its finish. And now, sitting in an emptying studio, Jimmy has to face the reality of what he's done. He took a shot at a legend and missed. Worse, he exposed himself in the process. His need to feel superior, to prove something. It backfired spectacularly. Somewhere out there, Eddie Murphy is probably with his team processing what happened. Maybe he's angry. Maybe he's disappointed. Maybe he's just tired of dealing with people who don't understand the difference between asking tough questions and being disrespectful. But one thing is certain, Eddie made a choice. He chose his dignity over playing along. He chose to walk away rather than participate in something that didn't serve him. And that choice resonated with the audience in the studio, with the people watching at home, with anyone who's ever been in a situation where they had to decide whether to stay and endure disrespect or stand up and leave. Eddie's walk-off wasn't just about a bad interview. It was about knowing your worth and refusing to compromise it, even on live television, even when walking away is a harder choice. Jimmy, on the other hand, has to live with this. He has to wake up tomorrow and face the headlines, the social media reactions, the think pieces about what went wrong. He has to come back to the studio and try to convince another audience that he's worth their time, that he deserves their trust. And that's going to be a lot harder now than it was before Eddie Murphy sat in that chair. So, here's the question, and this is what I want you to think about. When you're in a position of power, whether it's hosting a talk show or just having conversation with someone, do you use that position to lift people up or to tear them down? Do you ask questions because you're genuinely curious or because you want to prove you're smart enough to challenge someone? And when someone calls you out for crossing a line, do you listen and adjust or do you double down and make it worse? These are the questions that matter. These are the lessons from what happened on that stage. Eddie Murphy walked out, and in doing so, he walked into a moment that will define how people see both him and Jimmy for years to come. One of them came out looking like a legend who knows his worth. The other came out looking like someone who still has a lot to learn about respect. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and drop a comment below. Here's what I want to know. If you were in Eddie's position, would you have walked off or would you have stayed and finished the interview? Let me know your thoughts because this conversation is far from over.